The sea was still before dawn, so still that even the wind seemed to bow before its silence. Every ripple held its breath. Every wave was memory only, not motion. In that vast quiet somewhere, behind the silver veil of clouds, the sun refused to rise. Once Amaterasu had graced the world with her brilliance, golden warmth over rice fields, shining across the sacred islands. But now she hid, her light withdrawn, her heart shuddered, and the heavens had forgotten how to glow. It began with a quarrel, though the world did not remember the words. Her brother, the storm god Susanoo, had shouted his fury into the wind. He tore up the skies, broke sacred halls, and frightened the people below. And Amaterasu, heart heavy with grief and shame, turned away. She retreated into a cave by the silent sea, closing its entrance with a stone vast enough to hide the sun itself. Now, only the sea remembered her. It mirrored what light was left in the world, soft, silver, barely breathing. The moon tried to comfort it, but even the moon's reflection trembled. For without Amaterasu, the balance of heaven was gone. The gods gathered on the shore, staring at the still horizon. They waited, hoping the sun would forgive them. But silence was their only answer. Mountains no longer cast shadows. Trees forgot the sound of birds. The air cooled not cruelly, but with the loneliness of a song that has lost its singer. Somewhere in the dark, Amaterasu sat before the sealed entrance of her cave. Around her, the stones glittered faintly with the remnants of light, small sparks of what once was day. She traced her fingers along the cold walls, remembering the joy of sunlight spilling over the world. But she could not forgive. Her tears fell softly to the floor, and, where they touched the stone, the light inside dimmed further. Outside, the world waited, and the sea became her mirror. Its surface stilled so perfectly that it seemed carved from glass. No wave dared to rise. No fish dared to move. The silent sea was born that night, and even the gods whispered more quietly when they passed over it. When wind finally dared to speak again, it did so, in reverence. Lady of the dawn, the world grows cold without you. But the cave's mouth answered, with nothing, only the low hum of still water beyond. Even time hesitated to continue without her. Far above the clouds, the constellations burned brighter, trying to take her place. But their light was borrowed, and their warmth empty. Without the sun, color itself began to fade. Blue drained into gray, gold into pale dust. People below lit fires in her honor, yet their flames flickered weakly, imitations of what once rose naturally from her smile. In her solitude, Amaterasu remembered the laughter of the fields, the children offering rice at shrines, and the sound of bells carried by warm wind. She missed them, but the sorrow was deeper than distance. It was the weight of being misunderstood. So she stayed hidden, and the world learned the shape of absence. The silent sea stretched endlessly before her cave, a mirror, a prison, a prayer. In its depths, even reflection dared not move. The world beneath the heavens lay cold and dim. The rivers no longer danced, the fields had turned pale, and the hearts of mortals began to tremble. Without the sun, the rhythm of the world broke apart. Time itself forgot how to move. The gods gathered upon the highest peak, looking down at the sea that no longer shimmered. The moon hung weakly above them, a pale echo of what once was radiant. There, they spoke of Amaterasu, the hidden light, and wondered if her silence could be undone. Aim no Koyain, the wise one, bowed to the others. We cannot order the sun to shine. We must remind her that the world still loves her light. So they began their work. Along the silent sea, the gods placed mirrors of polished bronze, hoping the glint would reach the cave. Others sang hymns, old songs of dawn, yet even the air seemed reluctant to carry sound. Each voice faded before touching the stone that sealed the goddess away. In the mortal world, people began to light fires each morning, praying she might see their glow. Children offered rice grains on rooftops. Elders whispered stories of her warmth. But still no dawn came. Shadows lengthened until they no longer had owners. Amaterasu, within her cave, felt their longing. Faint, like the memory of laughter carried on wind, it reached her. Her fingers trembled, but her sorrow was heavy. Why should I return, she thought, to a world that cannot keep peace? Beyond the entrance, the gods grew weary. The sea mirrored only darkness. Hope dimmed, and one by one, divine voices quieted, until only the sound of still water remained. The moon sighed above, its silver light stretching thin as thread. But among the gathering, one goddess, Uzum, the spirit of laughter, refused despair. She stood barefoot upon the cold stones and whispered, "If she will not hear our pleas, then let her hear our joy." And so Uzum began to dance. Her steps were slow at first, soft as a heartbeat. Each movement brushed the ground with reverence, and the air began to stir. The gods turned to her, puzzled, as her laughter rippled through the silence. She moved with grace that defied sorrow, her body painting joy upon the dark canvas of night. The sea reflected her motion, small waves shimmering like the first memories of sunlight. Even the wind joined her, circling the mount in spirals of gentle sound. Laughter, the oldest magic, woke the silence, and within her cave, Amaterasu lifted her head. "What is this?" she whispered. Her hand hovered above the stone that sealed her. For the first time since the quarrel, she felt curiosity instead of grief. Outside, Uzum's dance grew wild and radiant. The gods, once solemn, began to smile. Musicless, timeless, her movements called forth life, as though joy itself could light the sky. Then, for a heartbeat, the bronze mirrors caught a glimmer, faint, golden, alive. It brushed the mouth of the cave. Amaterasu blinked. For the first time, the stone before her reflected her own light back to her eyes. And she saw it, a reminder that beauty still existed, even in sorrow. Her heart wavered. The silence inside began to thin, and deep within the cave, a single spark rekindled, small, fragile, but bright enough to promise that the world had not forgotten her. The cave breathed in rhythm with the sea. Outside, waves rolled softly against the stones, whispering their quiet devotion. The gods had fallen silent again. Their songs of hope had dissolved into the mist. Only Uzum continued her dance, steady and bright as a heartbeat in the dark. Inside, Amaterasu watched the faint shimmer that had reached her cave. It was weak, a single reflection, but it trembled like something alive. The light had not come to command her. It had come to remind her that she was missed. Her hands moved toward the stone at the mouth of the cave, then stopped. Her pride still weighed heavy, a chain she had forged herself. The storm her brother had made still echoed in her mind. She remembered the cries, the shattered halls, the tears she could not stop. "The world will not change," she whispered. "Why should I return to it?" But even as she spoke, her voice sounded smaller, not in anger, but in weariness. Beyond the stone, laughter rose again, the laughter of Yuzum's divine dance. It was not mockery, it was the laughter of life, the refusal of despair. Amaterasu closed her eyes. The sound stirred something deep within her, a part of her that remembered joy. Outside, the gods watched as Yuzum continued. She spun, arms outstretched, feet brushing water that glowed faintly under her touch. The sea, once silent, began to hum with her rhythm. The air trembled with warmth, and the bronze mirrors glimmered brighter. Within the cave, the goddess felt the pulse of that warmth against her skin. It was gentle, coaxing, patient, as if the world itself was breathing at her door. For a moment, she almost smiled. And then, a sound faint but clear, the cry of a rooster, calling out into endless night. Its voice reached the cave and lingered. It was the first mortal sound of courage since the light had gone. Amaterasu's heart tightened. She rose slowly, robes trailing like dawn mist. The stone before her glowed faintly now, the reflection of the mirrors and the dance outside. The darkness around her was no longer her ally. It had become her echo. She placed her hand on the cold surface. For the first time, it felt warm beneath her fingers. The light beyond was not forceful, it was asking permission. Perhaps, she thought, it is not the world that needs forgiveness, but I who must remember how to forgive. Outside, Yuzum's laughter rang out once more, joined by the voices of other gods. Together, they sang not a hymn of worship, but of welcome, a melody that wrapped around the cave like a soft tide. Amaterasu took a breath that trembled at its edges. Then another, stronger. She lifted the stone slightly. A thin thread of light pierced the dark and spilled across the floor, chasing away the shadows that had lived there too long. The gods gasped. Yuzum froze mid-step, eyes shining. The mirrors caught the new light and threw it back toward the cave, doubling it, tripling it, until the cave itself shimmered as though dawn had returned. And in that sacred moment, the silence broke. The sea, no longer still, exhaled. The world, long dormant, remembered its pulse. The cave that had once hidden light now glowed from within, and Amaterasu, radiant and gentle, stood before it, not as a conqueror, but as one who had remembered her purpose. The silent sea began to sing again, its waves brushing the shore in reverence. Dawn had not yet come, but its promise was alive, waiting, breathing, ready. The world was still between breaths, caught in the moment between despair and dawn. The gods stood on the sacred shore, staring at the faint beam of light that had escaped Amaterasu's cave. It was small, but it was alive, and it was enough. Yuzum stood at the center of the gathering. Her laughter had called that light forth once, and she was not done. The goddess of joy, of dance, of sacred mischief, felt the rhythm of the world trembling beneath her feet. The earth was waiting not for words, but for movement. She stepped forward. Her bare feet touched the cold stones, and each contact left a warmth behind, as if dawn were learning how to walk. She raised her arms, and the air began to move with her. The gods fell silent. The wind, the sea, and even the shadows leaned closer to watch. Yuzum's dance began slowly. Every turn, every motion echoed through the stillness. Her laughter, clear as a bell, scattered the fear that clung to the divine. The bronze mirrors caught her reflection and multiplied it, filling the shore with glimmers of gold and silver. Her body became a story. Each gesture was a line of light, written across the dark canvas of night. The gods began to smile. Then they began to laugh, quietly at first, then with the relief of those who remember what joy feels like. The world responded. The silent sea shimmered again, small waves chasing each other as if remembering how to play. The stars dimmed, no longer needing to compete. Even the air tasted different, softer, lighter, sweeter. Within her cave, Amaterasu felt the change. The warmth pressed gently against her skin, coaxing her heart to beat faster. She could feel laughter, like sunlight touching her spirit. For the first time in what felt like eternity, she smiled faintly but truly. She whirled and spun, hair flying like ribbons of flame, her laughter rolling like thunder that promised rain. Every god joined her now, clapping, singing, their voices rising to fill the heavens with celebration. "Come, Lady of Light," Yuzum called. "The world waits not to worship, but to welcome you home." Amaterasu, listening, stepped closer to the mouth of her cave. The beam of light that had escaped before widened, catching her face. She blinked, her eyes reflecting the golden glow of her own power returned. She had not been forgotten. The world had learned to smile for her again. She touched the stone once more. This time it did not resist. The barrier was not a prison. It was only waiting for her choice. With a gentle push, the rock rolled aside, and brilliance spilled out like a tide breaking over the shore. The gods shielded their eyes, but they laughed even as the light bathed them. Yuzum fell to her knees, tears shining brighter than pearls. Her dance had done what no prayer could. It had reminded the universe of its joy. The cave blazed with the return of the sun. The silent sea turned to molten gold, and the heavens themselves exhaled. Light touched every corner that had known only shadow. For a heartbeat, even time stopped to watch. Amaterasu stepped forward. Her robes gleamed like dawn itself. She looked upon the world she had hidden from and forgave it, not with words, but with warmth. Yuzum rose, bowed, and smiled through her tears. "You were never gone, Lady of the Sun," she said softly. "We only needed to remember how to dance." And Amaterasu answered with light, a light that filled sky and sea, heart and memory. The silent sea sang again, not in silence but in peace. The night had ended, and in its place joy was reborn. When Amaterasu stepped from the cave, the world gasped. It had forgotten how to see, and suddenly vision was reborn. The heavens, blind for an eternity, opened their eyes again. The first rays of sunlight poured like liquid gold across the silent sea. The gods fell to their knees. The air, heavy for so long, broke open with joy. Mountains gleamed, rivers sang, and every living thing lifted its head to feel warmth again. The darkness retreated, not in fear, but in peace, as if night itself bowed before its queen. Amaterasu stood at the threshold, her light gentle yet vast. It did not burn, it healed. She looked out upon the world she had once abandoned, and in its trembling beauty, she saw herself, fractured, mended, radiant once more. Yuzum approached her, still breathless from the dance that had bridged heaven and earth. She knelt before the goddess of the sun. "Your light has returned, great one," she whispered. "But so too has the laughter of the world." Amaterasu smiled. "Then perhaps that is what I truly am," she said softly. "Not just the light of the heavens, but the warmth that rises when joy is remembered." She stepped forward, and as she did, the silent sea erupted in brilliance. Waves turned to molten gold, each crest a hymn to the dawn. The mirrors along the shore, placed by the gods, caught her light and scattered it. One by one, they sent the sun's memory racing across the world. Villages woke. Forests sighed. The frost that had clung to the earth dissolved like sorrow forgiven. The goddess raised her hand, and the sky blazed open. Clouds parted, and for the first time in what felt like ages, the blue returned, deep, endless, alive. Birds took to the air, their songs spilling through the valley like bells. Every voice of creation seemed to cry in unison, "She has returned." The gods began their celebration. Yuzum danced once more, this time not to summon light, but to honor it. Her laughter echoed across the waves, carried far by the wind that once knew only silence. Even Susanoo, the stormbringer, stood apart, humbled and still. He looked upon his sister and bowed, the fury in his heart quieted by her glow. Amaterasu gazed at him, and in her eyes there was no anger, only reflection. "Storms may break the sky," she said, "but even they cannot erase the promise of dawn." And for the first time Susanoo smiled. The sea shimmered with color, reds, pinks, and golds blooming together like petals of fire. Every ripple became a mirror to her radiance. The silent sea was silent no more. It had become a symphony of light. From that day, the world remembered. Light can hide, but never die. It waits in laughter, in forgiveness, in the small sparks of hope that endure even when all else fades. As the day stretched across the horizon, Amaterasu turned her face to the wind. Her light moved beyond sight, into hearts, into dreams. The gods watched her rise, her brilliance now a promise renewed. And as dusk approached once more, she whispered to the world, "Even in darkness, I will return." The silent sea shimmered beneath the falling sun, its waves whispering her name. Light and shadow danced together once more, not as enemies, but as lovers of balance. The world, reborn, sighed in peace. The morning that followed was unlike any other. The horizon, once veiled in shadow, now shimmered with life. The silent sea glowed softly under the newborn light, its surface kissed by the first colors of dawn. The world exhaled, slowly, gratefully, as if it had been holding its breath since the sun first disappeared. Amaterasu stood upon the mountain's edge, her gaze sweeping over the lands of Japan. Below her, rivers glittered like threads of silver, winding through valleys newly awakened. The scent of earth and salt filled the air, the fragrance of rebirth. For a long moment, she said nothing. Her eyes, radiant yet calm, took in the beauty of what had endured through darkness. She felt the rhythm of life pulsing beneath her feet, the song of creation humming again in every leaf and stone. Yuzum approached quietly, her laughter softer now, tempered by awe. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "The world remembers how to shine." Amaterasu turned to her and smiled. "No, Yuzum," she said. "The world has learned that light is not only mine to give. It was there hidden, in every act of kindness, in every voice that dared to hope." The gods gathered behind them, their faces warmed by the golden glow. Even Susanoo, the Stormbringer, stood humbled, his heart quieted by the peace that followed chaos. He bowed deeply to his sister. "Forgive me," he said, his voice trembling like the tide. "I did not understand the strength of what I sought to challenge." Amaterasu placed a hand on his shoulder. "Storms have their place," she said. "Without shadow, light would forget its purpose. Without sorrow, joy would lose its depth." The sea below caught her reflection, stretching her light into infinity. Waves rolled in slow rhythm, each one carrying a whisper of gratitude. Across the land, mortals rose from their homes, faces lifted toward the sun. Farmers wept softly in their fields, mothers sang to their children, and the temples echoed with the sound of prayer, not of fear, but of thankfulness. High above them all, the sky blazed brighter. The world had not only been restored, it had been transformed. Light was no longer taken for granted, it had become sacred again. As the day unfolded, Amaterasu spoke one final blessing. Her voice, carried on wind and wave, reached every heart. "Remember," she said, "the sun rises not because it must, but because it chooses to. So too must you rise, again and again, no matter how long the night may seem." Yuzum bowed deeply. The gods sang once more, their harmony filling heaven and earth. And when the song ended, the silence that followed was no longer heavy. It was peace. The silent sea glittered, calm and eternal. The sun climbed higher, bathing every corner of the world in warmth. Its light touched the temples, the forests, the mountains, and in that moment, Japan was reborn beneath the eyes of its goddess. The story of Amaterasu became a promise that no matter how deep the darkness, dawn would always return. And somewhere, beyond the golden clouds, the goddess smiled. For even in silence, her light remained.